Hi and welcome to another episode of Mark's Motivational Podcast, another Authors Tuesday. So today I'm delighted to be joined by another great guest, Diarmuid Fitzgerald. He's a published author by Alba Publishing, and he's a number of books out there, and he's trained in Reiki and NLP and life coaching as well. So great stuff. It's great to welcome you today, Diarmuid. Thanks a lot for coming on the podcast.
Great. Thank you for inviting me. I'm delighted to be here.
Yeah, great stuff. Thank you. So we'll probably start off the show, if you wouldn't mind telling the listeners a little bit about yourself and the books you've written would be a great start.
Yeah, well, I have 3 books published, so they're mostly poetry there. So I write haiku-related poems,
Yeah.
and then I also write regular, what you might call regular poetry as well.
Yeah.
So my first 2 books was Thames Away. They came out in 2015, and then 1,000 Sparks came out in 2018. They were haiku mostly. And then the last book came out 2 years ago. It's called The Singing Hollow, and that's regular poetry. A little bit of haiku in it, but mostly poetry. But more recently, I've kind of opened out into writing prose. So I wrote a novel and got it edited to a certain level, and I put that aside. And at the moment, I'm writing a non-fiction book on creative writing and healing. So I'm going to be approaching Hay House with that idea to see if they'll go with it. I was in London recently at a Hay House workshop. They're running a competition, and they gave us all this info about how to put a book proposal together. So I'm in the middle of doing that. So fingers crossed. Watch this space. You never know.
Great stuff. That sounds brilliant. The best of luck with all that. And where did the journey start for yourself, Diarmuid? Have you always been a writer, or where did it start for yourself, the journey of writing?
I wrote when I was 17, so I was in secondary school, and I started writing poetry. Up to then, I didn't write anything. I think I wrote a couple of short stories, bits and pieces here and there, nothing major, typical stuff that you would do as a school child and in secondary school, teacher comes in and says, "No, you're going to write a story." And I'm like, God, do I have to? But actually, anytime I sat down and wrote it, I enjoyed it. But I never did it outside of the require compulsion to do it. And then a teacher basically in school, secondary school, he basically opened up poetry to me, because up to then I didn't understand poetry. To me, it's just this weird thing that weird people wrote, and why don't they just write it in a simple, straightforward manner that anybody can understand? Like, why do they have to have it so weird? And you have to work hard to understand it, and then you get to the second line, you're like, I give up, I haven't a clue what this is about. And basically, he didn't say this, but basically what he really was saying is poetry is a form of code. So it's like an encoded language, and then you have to crack the code. And once you crack the code, you get it. It's like spies writing to each other. They write this weird way, and then you can crack the code. It's like, that's what we're talking about now. The trouble is that every poet has their own individual code, and it changes from poem to poem and from throughout their lives. So it's not the same thing. So he really opened it up, and I got it. And then I just kept the poetry writing up since then. Now, there's been periods where I've stopped writing it because business of life and all that kind of stuff, but I'm more or less kept at it since I was then. But the publishing experience came later. That was more of a much later period in my life. And when I wrote poetry, I never wrote it with the intention of I'm going to become a writer and I'm going to get books published. I just wrote for me. And then it was only later on that I arrived at a place of, okay, I need to do something with this. So basically in 2010, I kind of arrived at a really important decision of, look, with all this creativity and all of the stuff I've written, what do I do with it? Do I just motor on and treat it as a hobby, which is what I did up to then, or do I treat it seriously? And I said, look, I'm going to have to treat my writing seriously. It's going to be a second job, essentially.
Yeah.
And I need to give it the time it takes in order to get it published, to get out there. So it's kind of like do or die. It was like pack it away and just forget it because it's going nowhere, or go all in and just bring it somewhere. So once I made that decision, I think it's a bit like the universe. Once you make a committed decision, the people, the places, and the opportunities start to show up. So at that stage, I was living down in West Cork. I was a bit lonely, isolated. It was the height of the recession. Things weren't great at the time. And I suddenly started hearing about different writing groups, and they were running competitions. And I got my very first publication experience through a writing group down in West Cork called the Hungry Hill Writers, and I got into their very first anthology, and they're still doing it. Like, as far as I know, they're still running that, and that was great to see my name in print for the first time. It was just like, yay, you know.
Yeah.
And then I kept at that, and then I started joining groups here in Dublin, and I got mentoring experiences from a lady called Maeve O'Sullivan, who was a haiku poet. And that's another thing, like, if people out there want to learn how to get published, is get a mentor, do creative writing classes, like learn from people who've gone before you, and really put yourself, really, whatever advice they give you, you know, put it into practice. And that's what I did from this lady, and she had me shave years. What would have taken me, say, 5 years to do my own, I did in the space of 2 years under her guidance. And then the lucky thing was, by working with her, she was very much in with a publisher. Kim Richardson is his name. He runs Alba. And then she kind of put me in touch with him. By this stage, I had haiku poems published in various journals, and, you know, had been shortlisted for 1 or 2 prizes. So I remember putting my first book together and then approaching Kim with trepidation, you know, giving him the manuscript. I was meeting him at a launch and passing the document over. My hands were shaking. And then he just opened it up and read a couple of pages and go, yeah, this will do. And I went, you know what? And he says, yeah, I'll publish. And I nearly felt like saying, are you sure?
Yeah.
Didn't say that, because one of the things you have to get used to as a writer, as I'm sure you know, is rejection. And a lot of people crush themselves. You know, it's just part of the course. You get rejected loads of places, and you just have to go, right, okay, not you, not this time, another time. And I was so kind of surprised that he said yes. And I asked him then, like, well, it was afterwards I found out, why did he go for that book? And he says, normally most first collections are very disorganized and they aren't that well cohesive. But he says this book was very cohesive. It was all written on a theme. So basically, I'd walked the River Thames from London to Source, and I wrote all the haiku poems on the way. And what you call it? So there was this underlying theme to organize the entire collection, and that kind of appealed to him. And because only about, say, 10 or 15 of the 100 haiku had been published already, whereas previously he might have expected a much higher threshold. So he went with that. So that was the first book, and it kind of then just rolled from there. I tried every opportunity, you know, sent loads of stuff out there, got loads of rejections, applied for this grant, sent in loads of stuff. I'll probably spend more money trying to win prizes than I actually got it back. But, you know, it's nearly like an inverse investment, you know, you're spending more than you actually get back. But you know, it's just sending out there, seeing what works. And then eventually sort of, you know, that's paid off now, because when I brought out the third book, this one, Singing Hello, this was launched in the tail end of COVID, and I did the launch online because people were very kind of still wary about meeting up. And people started to show up at this launch, third launch, that I didn't know before. And the 2 other launches, I knew everyone in the room. You know, I could say, I knew every single one of them. One, people started coming on that I didn't know. And as a result of this and other opportunities, people came to me and gave me, you know, do you want to go to this workshop? Do you want to read at this festival? You know, do you want this opportunity? And I'm like, okay. You know, recently there, about 2 months ago, I did a workshop in Clondalkin in Dublin, part of the Red Line Festival. And I didn't ask for that. They gave it to me.
Brilliant, yeah.
So it's one of these things, if you hang in there and you keep putting a name out there and you keep doing it, you kind of reach, I think, a tipping point where people start to come back to you and they start to give back to you. And it's a bit like sending out to the universe positive energy.
Yeah.
And it may take a long time. It could take years as a writer, but that eventually returns back. And that's what I'm experiencing now. I'm getting the return back.
Right.
And being really positive.
Well, that's great, Diarmuid. Great advice for anybody that's starting out as a writer, like, or first time, because you know the way you got a publisher. Did it take you long to get an actual publisher? I know you're saying you got that person in the book launch. Was or when you went to an event?
Yeah.
Did you ever think of going down the self-publishing route, or?
I did. It wasn't really on my mind, because I think what I did was I worked myself up to that place. I wasn't really. I followed the advice that Louise L. Hay said. do what's before you. That was great advice she gave. Don't get so fixated on what's next. Yes, you do need to plan what's next, but it's kind of do what's next. Now, I've kind of always followed that advice most of the time. Other times when I didn't follow that advice, I tripped myself up and got snarled up in the, trying to work things out 10 steps ahead. So it's like walking up a staircase. How do you walk up a staircase? Take the next step. Don't leap yourself up 5 steps. You're going to crash on the staircase and fall down. So it's like, what's your next step? So if you haven't written a book, well, write the book. If you've got a book written, well done. That's just draft 1. How about getting to draft 2 and then 3 and then 20 and 50? It's kind of like, so it's like, what's the next step? So, just do what's before you. So reason why I got that publisher is I walked the River Thames in 2011 and 2012. And I wrote about essentially 200 haiku along those trips. So that's an enormous amount of haiku. So I knew I had the basis of a manuscript. But I knew the way manuscripts go is that, there's a lot of editing and there's a lot of whatever. And that's where my mentor, Mavis Sullivan, came in. So I went along to a meeting of this organization called Haiku Ireland. They don't exist anymore. And they used to meet once every 2 months. And, we share haiku with chats and coffee and all the rest. And then through that, I then turned to Maeve and said, hi, would you mind mentoring me? I'll pay you for it. And she agreed. So we used to meet up before these meetings. But she'd meet me for an hour. I'd buy her lunch or whatever. And then she would mentor me in the art of haiku and tanka, which is longer haiku poems. Haiku poems are usually 3 lines long. And a tanka is usually 5 lines long. And so she went through that and she gave me loads of feedback on it. And I implemented everything she said. So I was willing to invest in myself by hiring her to pay for it. So if you want a mentor, be willing to pay the money, be willing to invest. There's a lot of people out there, they just want the freebies. Actually put their own personal money into it. If you hire somebody who has the expertise, you are shaving years of effort, years on the other side. They can tailor their advice to suit you, your strengths and your weaknesses. And because of that, then I also started sending out my haiku off to the different journals, and they started publishing them and all the rest. They didn't always publish them. I remember some editors came back and going, these haiku don't grab. You get rejection. It was just part of the course. And I wasn't even thinking along publishing yet that stage or even who. I was more thinking of, let's just get the book into better shape. And that's what I did. So then eventually this process came to an end and I really worked in it. And I actually went off to a residency then in a place called the Tyrone Guthrie Centre, which is up in County Monaghan. And, you have to apply for approval. You can't just rock up. Goes through board approval. I got that. I didn't have a book out published. And then I went there for a week. And I had all my haiku basically printed on cards. At this stage, I was deciding what was going in and what was going out. What would make the cut and what order. And I remember I spent a week up there and I was moving stuff around literally on the floor, like the whole floor, about 100 of them. And I was moving them around. And eventually I got them into some more. And so that was it. So it's good to go to on residencies, take yourself off to a hotel, take yourself, off to something like that. If you can, take time out. If you can take a week away from work or whatever, just a real deep dive into sorting things out. That's worth it. It may cost you money. You might have to hire childcare, somebody, whatever else. I don't know. Just do whatever it needs to take. So I did that. And then I came back. And then through Maeve, she asked me, I used my networks. So she approached Kim. And the fact that I'd been published previously in different haiku journals, and the fact that she had mentored me was a big asset. So that was the big sell to him. And then he kind of read through the manuscript and then he literally agreed there and then.
Nice one. That's great.
So and it's been good from that point of view there. And then so I've gone back to him twice then with my other collections, and each time I've kind of pushed myself forward. So when the second book came out, 1,000 Sparks, this time I kind of wanted to up the level because initially I went back to Kim with essentially with the back catalogue of my haiku. So it's a bit like the second album, you're pulling the songs out and just like the sort of the ropey editions that kind of got through. And so I did that and he said no, and he rejected that manuscript. And I went, what? How dare you? And he was saying it's not a cohesive collection. And he insisted that all the haiku there were about 150 of them, would need to be published. All. I went, it'll take decades. Like,
yeah.
I was astounded. And so I kind of took up the challenge. And I remember just getting really focused. And I sat down, and every week I would send out the haiku to different journals. I found out a whole load of journals and then sent them out. And they began to be picked up, and they began to be published. And eventually, after about 2 years, nearly all of them were published.
Nice.
By this stage, I set up my website. And what I did, a sneaky thing then was any of them that weren't picked up, I just threw them on my website and they were published. And all the rest of it. And then I also, through the network, the Haiku World, I gave it to a guy called Sean O'Connor, who's the editor of the Haiku Journal, and a lady called Roberta Beery, who was kind of a bit of a bigwig in the haiku world. And I asked them to give me feedback, and I said, look, go through the manuscript, don't hold back, don't spare my feelings, and give me feedback. And by God, they did not hold back. They came back with a shredded manuscript. It was just like my tail was put between my legs, and it was just like, oh God. But although that was a bit humiliating at the time, I learned hugely from it. So I learned to really up the quality of the haiku, and even that some of these were published haiku and published in respectable journals. So I learned through that, and then that got published. And also, the first book, I never sent it out to be reviewed or anything like that, because just getting the book published was enough. This time, I learned a valuable lesson was get the book published, take a break, and then do the launch, because I had to do the whole publication thing, work with my editor, organize the launch, do all that. And that was 6 months of just work. And I was actually exhausted. My first launch, I was wrecked afterwards. It was just I was combed strictly. This time I learned just to do everything much slower, because I didn't know, because I'd never done this before. So second time around, I made sure I enjoyed the process much more. It was good, and all the rest of it. And I got reviews, and the views were very mixed. Some of the reviews were very positive, some were okay, and some of them were very critical. So that's another thing I learned is, you spend ages at putting a book together, you really, really work at it, and then somebody else can just take a complete dislike to it and just decide to demolish it. And you're like, kind of going, gosh,
You have to have tough skin.
You kind of do. I realized that a review is somebody's opinion in print.
Yeah, that's it.
That's all it is.
Because A Thousand Sparks, you mentioned there a few minutes ago. What is that book about, Diarmuid?
It's haiku. So again, the short poems, so the 3 poems.
Yeah, because you're going to read out one of them poems tonight. Sorry.
Yeah.
Happy to do that?
I do. Yeah. So this is not a haiku poem. This is a regular poem.
Oh, great.
So called Singing Hollow. So it's the name of the title. So it's an actual place in Dublin. It's a fairly self-explanatory poem. It doesn't need a huge amount. So some of my poems are it does what it says in the tin type of poetry, and some of them are a little bit more, say, obscure. So this is called The Singing Hollow.
Brilliant. Yeah, thanks, Diarmuid.
Deep in the bowels of Dublin, there is St. Albans Park. In the middle is a singing hollow, a slab of rock, upright, grey, with a hole carved into it. You are invited to place your head inside, clear your throat, purse your lips, and hum until all the organs are in tune, and the pulse matches the stone. Waves spread out and meet the roads, blackbirds, apartments, all vibrate in concert beyond what the ears and eyes can tell, but the heart knows.
Very good. Great stuff, Diarmuid. Great stuff. Well done. Yeah, it's straight to the point kind of poetry. Yeah, really good, really good. And your novel as well. Do you want to talk about that? I know you're saying you kind of left it to one side for the moment, but
I have, yeah. So I wrote a novel. It's called An Affinity for Metal. So it's about a guy called Dara Hayes. He's born with special ability, so he can attract metal towards him, bend it metal to repel it, or so use it. He's born with this ability. He doesn't know why or how he's born with it, but he just has it, and he basically learns to grow up to have deep shame around it, because it's kind of like a freaky ability. So his parents just freak out when they see him doing sort of weird stuff with it. So he basically learns to sort of turn inwards and becomes a very withdrawn person, and he kind of like hides deep shame, and he kind of spends most of his life up to that point when the novel begins sort of hiding things and hiding himself, and then through a series of experiences it kind of forces him to kind of start using his ability, but initially he uses it in a more destructive way rather than constructive way. And then that kind of sets him off on an adventure. And he has romantic relationships and this kind of thing, and with other men and all the rest. And then it spirals from there, and then eventually kind of reaches a crisis point where he has to make a decision of how to use this ability. So, and it kind of goes from there. So it kind of follows him and that there. So it's, it's that kind of the genre might be classed as magic realism as a genre there. So, yeah, so I wrote the novel basically about 10 years ago initially, the first drafts, and then I put it aside and then I came back to it. So I've kind of been doing that, taking in stages, because I've been doing the poetry as well and other stuff, as well. So I was writing it, editing it there up to now, but then more recently I've pivoted to writing this non-fiction book.
Right, yeah. So is this kind of the novel, is that like fictional, or is it realism novel?
Well, the novel is fiction, obviously.
Fiction,
so
well,
it's a type of genre that's called magic realism, which takes reality with a twist.
Oh yeah, very good.
So it's not full-on fantasy where you're making a complete other world, but it's kind of like, say, 90% this world and 10% not quite this world. So that's the way I use the term magic realism because it's just a handy label. Because one of the first things, when people ask you, so what kind of a novel you're writing, they want to know what genre you're in. And I'm like, I don't really know. So I just latched onto this label, partially because not many people write that kind of genre. So I'm just kind of like, I'll just stick that label on it.
I haven't heard that term myself, so that's yeah. And I can see as well that you're Reiki healer as well, involved in NLP.
Yes.
Do you use them skills in your writing as well? Do you find they're a great asset to have with your writing, Diarmuid?
Yes, I do. Initially, when I wrote the first draft of the novel, there was quite a bit of what I would call spirituality talk. So I remember I had one character in the novel. He was actually an angel figure, and he would sort of talk the spirituality stuff in the novel. But then when I was reading the novel again, I kind of went, he's not very convincing as a character. He's more of a mouthpiece. So eventually I had to get rid of that spirituality stuff and kind of make it more subliminal. That I don't want to be hitting the reader over the head with the spirituality talk. In the novel, I want them to kind of more experience it as the novel goes through. So that made the novel better. There. So in terms of my own writing, I've started to write more poetry now, where I'm bringing in the spirituality aspects of things, and it's kind of opening up a whole other world. So that kind of poetry I wrote there is kind of more, it does what it says in the tin type of poetry. What I'm writing now is a bit more off the wall. It's kind of going places where it's kind of like, it's very trippy poetry. It's kind of going places where it's like, I have no idea what I'm talking about. In a way, that's kind of a good thing. It's nearly bordering automatic writing. It's just like, it kind of nearly writes itself. And it's like, I have no idea what I'm talking about. Just try and get it into some sort of shape. So that's where that's taken me. So it's kind of taken me in a area that I didn't really expect. But that's what I like about writing, is I don't necessarily know what's coming up all the time, but at the same time, it's it brings new things, new horizons to be there. So yeah, and I do the Reiki on myself, and I do it on clients, and then the NLP and that kind of stuff. I use that mainly through my day-to-day life, and that helps an awful lot.
Like you were saying earlier on, kind of being a writer and studying NLP, it can really open a lot of doors for you, can't it, Diarmuid?
Yeah, it has. It definitely has. Like I'm in a number of different groupings, and one of them is kind of like a spirituality grouping.
Yeah, right.
And again, like for the non-fiction book, I mean, I've just started it, so it's still early stages yet. But part of me has thought, well, I could reach out to them and maybe sort of, if they're willing to, is kind of act as guinea pigs, sort of, like, because I'm writing my own story and I'm writing sort of exercises and techniques, and then I'm kind of like reaching out to them. I haven't tried it yet, but it's a possibility of saying, look, guys, I've developed certain techniques. Would you be willing to sort of just try them out? Right. And maybe get testimonials and stories and see, and then maybe they could end up in the book. So that it's kind of like using the opportunities that are before you and sort of doing that. Like literally I got this flash of idea just 2 months ago. I was actually at the workshop in Hay House in London. And initially I came with a different proposal. And Hay House kind of said to me, no, we don't publish that kind of a book. It's kind of like a history book. And they were saying, no, we don't do history. And I'm like, okay. And then that night I just got this download and it just came to me. And it was like, I'm a healer and I do creative writing. So why not do healing and creative writing together? And it was just like 2 + 2. But up to that day, it just never occurred to me. And it's just like, it was a bit like a duh moment. It's just,
Light
you
moment, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, great stuff.
And so and that's one of the things they were saying in the Hay House workshop was, what's your unique selling point? Where do you come from? How do you stand out from the crowd? And I went, well, I said, I do the healing, I do the creative writing, and I've done both. So bring the two together. And that's my USP. And it's just like, market that. And so, yeah, I'm just kind of rolling with that. And then I'm just getting the ideas are coming to me then.
Yeah.
It's not like previously writing for me had been difficult, and it wasn't always easy. But this is just rolling in. It's just like, it's flowing down and it's coming out very coherently and all the rest. And it's really good. I think that's the experience I've had in writing and editing and all is now working in my favor. And I'm doing an awful lot of what Sonia Choquette, I met her at that workshop, the Hay House one, and she talks about, you're active in your highest vibe and letting spirit guide you and all that. And I'm doing a lot of that. Like I'm doing a lot of journaling and a lot of kind of walking the talk, really, because you're having, I think what makes people successful as a writer is if you walk the talk. Do you walk the talk? If you walk the talk, people get that. And there's no BS in that,
Yeah.
And so if you've walked the talk, that comes through in your writing or in your workshops or in whatever you do. And so like that, I'm just turning to spirit and going, you sort this out, you do this. And it's amazing because it just really sorts things out. Like even there, like a friend of mine was on to me about going to the Eurovision next year, and there was all these obstacle blocks in the way, and this wasn't working, that wasn't working. And today, myself and a friend, we booked flights, we booked a hotel, and I got a ticket to go. And it all just went boom, 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 boom.
Yeah.
It just literally landed in. And I was just like, okay, all right. So that's how you do it.
Done.
And it was just like, it actually is that easy. And up to now in my head, I was like, oh no, it has to be hard. It has to be difficult. Struggle, struggle, struggle. And then it's like, well, if you want to struggle, fine, go for that. But, there's a way of just letting it go and turning to spirit and doing all that. And, and not letting upsetting things or difficult things bother you. We'd all have upsetting things. We'd all have disappointments. We'd all experience rejection. We'd all experience no's or, whatever else. And just kind of going, okay, just put that down and move on.
Yeah. It's like reframing, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Totally reframing, yeah.
Yeah.
The quicker you can get to that and to the lesson and reframe and just use whatever techniques you know and you have. So yeah, the NLP really helped because I remember like 10 years ago, I got onto that spirituality journey. And again, I did it. I was brought into spirituality literally kicking and screaming. It was just like, in the way like you drag children to something and they're like by the fingernails. That was me.
Yeah.
It's like, and the universe put me into a place where it was either go down the route of personal development and spirituality or go stark crazy mad. And I kind of got that choice. So I was working in a school. I had very difficult classes. I had a boss who I found difficult to work with. Parents constantly complaining. It was just it was like a war zone. Every day was like a war zone. And I was going in, and I could see my mental health just about to go. And then I reached out through my sister. She put me in touch with a lady called Betty Cosgrave. And then I did a couple of sessions with her. And then she suggested this course in NLP, which I'd never heard of before. I went along and I did it. And it was life transforming. And when I did that course, all I wanted to do at that stage, and the height of my ambition was, I just want to survive the day. I didn't want to become this amazing, famous person. I didn't want to know all this huge stuff. I was like, can I get through the day and just survive it? So my wins were very low. Because some people who are in a very conflicting situation, if you're in an abusive relationship, if you're in a very traumatic situation, you're not thinking big dreams. You're just thinking, can I get to the end of the day? Can I get out of the situation?
Yeah.
And that's all I wanted. And I remember using NLP as kind of like a suit of armor, just kind of like building myself up, get through the day and get out the other end.
Yeah.
2 years of that, just a constant fight. And eventually I got out to the other side, and then it was just like, so I learned an awful lot from that. And that was really good, because I always say to people, I had a midlife crisis come early. That was in my 30s. Some people get in their 40s and their 50s, because up to then I was very, just, 5D or five sensory, kind of person, just wasn't really into spirituality at all. And then that kind of broke the mold open. And then I got hooked on it, and I started to learn loads. And then I went on from there, and I got eventually into Reiki and light healing, and this thing called DARE, called Dissolve and Resolve Emotion. And then I also studied with a lady called Calvert, who was Bob Proctor's #1 consultant. And like, God, talk about success now. That lady is, she's onto something else. She went from £4.20 to now being nearly 10 millionaire, if not plus, in the space of 6 years, and I was like, wow. So I learned an awful lot from her, principles of success, and I'm still learning. So, and I'm beginning to see the returns come back. So if upsetting things happen to me now, I still have moments, I still kind of go,
yeah,
but it doesn't bother me as much to the same extent. And I'm able to ground myself and steady myself a lot more. And then I'm able to kind of go, okay, what's the lesson here? Whereas previously I would just fight the details. I'd fight the circumstance. And, as you know, when you fight a situation, you strengthen it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
There. Well, the hardest things I've learned is to stop talking about it. That's been the really hardest thing. Because, naturally enough, we want to talk about whatever things are going on and complain and la. And this has been more of a thing more recently, probably in the last year or two. I've sort of turned the volume down, and in some cases I deliberately chosen not to mention upsetting, horrible, difficult things that are happening.
Yeah.
And it's funny, and by not doing that, initially it was very uncomfortable, but by not doing that, I'm actually finding I'm not adding to the situation. I'm able to kind of float above it a bit. And then the solutions start coming in. And that's been eye-opening for me. That's been kind of, so when you don't keep adding to the situation and adding negative energy, and you step back as much as you can and sort of observe it and sort of
negotiate,
place. The people, the place, the opportunities start showing up to solve the problem for you if you can't do it by yourself. And that's been an amazing experience there. And like I said, I'm able to center myself much more quickly now.
Right. Yeah. No, it is an outstanding thing to know, the NLP for anybody system, because like you're working as well on creative writing workshops as well. You've done that as well.
I have, yeah.
Yeah,
I still do that. So what I do is I offer kind of courses on novel writing, short story writing, if people want that, or poetry. And so whatever people are into, and it's kind of like I take from the point of view of where you're at to go that next step up. So there's various packages, in terms of, if you just want to start, if you want to complete something, say like you're working on a novel and you want to complete that, or you have a novel written, you want to edit it and kind of bring it up to the next level, for those. And I've given creative writing workshops, in various festivals and as part of that. So that's been good. And, and people have been very open and receptive to that. My main advice is writing is a journey, and there's more. A lot of people misunderstand. They think you're not a writer until you have a book with your name in the front, but you're a writer once you write anything. Now, what you write publishable, and doesn't necessarily mean people aren't necessarily interested. But what it means is that you are a writer first, and then you go and you get that published. And there's various ways of publishing. Just limit yourself to thinking about a book. There's like journals, there's the online, there's a whole host of things. There's open mics. There's a whole variety of ways of reaching an audience, and it's kind of open your mind to that. So if you have a very narrow view of I'm not a writer until I see a name in my book with an ISBN number back produced by a traditional publishing house, that's one way in, but there's many ways in. And people are still fixated on traditional publishing. Yes, it's great, it's good, it's lovely to have somebody to be behind you and do all that heavy lifting for you. But more and more people are going on the route of self-publishing. And I know a few people, they're really good at marketing. They can make $50K a year or more plus, through self-publishing. So, some people can make a livelihood out of it. So it's, it's more, I think about 10 years ago, self-publishing was seen as the route of the desperate, in terms of, only the rejects got self-published. Now, more people are pivoting to self-publishing, because with self-publishing, you have more control over, what you send out there. You basically keep the money. The downside is you have to do everything. You have to do all the editing, the marketing, the distribution, the whole work. So that is the disadvantage of self-publishing, is that it all falls on you. So there is different ways of approaching it. And I'd say there's different types of writing. The kind of writing I do, though, is what we call literary writing, which is the work is kind of scrubbed up to a very high level. And that is what I am drawn towards. Not everybody's into that, and that's fine. But if you want to get more traditionally published, it would tend to be on the more literary end of the scale. That's what I kind of personally go for. But, there's different avenues and there's different standards. So again, it just depends on what you want. And one thing I would say for people, if they do want to get published, is don't seek to be or don't seek validation. If that's your main goal. A lot of people, they seek, oh, I want to get published. I'm not a writer until I get published, and I need to get, all this validation from being published, and all this. It is lovely to have your name in print, you see your name in the book, and it's been number and all that things sitting on a bookshop. That's amazing. I don't dismiss that, and I've had that experience, and all the rest of it. But if you're seeking that alone, publishing is a very difficult journey, because you will experience an awful lot of rejection. You publish to share with an audience. You publish to put something in print. You put it into a book form because you have a message, you have something you want to give to an audience. And when you have something to give to an audience and you're of service to people, that is what makes things come faster and quicker to you. So if you take it from that point of view, and you can get the validation on the way. I mean, it's lovely. Like in a week's time now, I was nominated in a poetry prize. So I'm going to be reading a poem, got commended. And that's lovely to go along to that prize and to be commended, and I'll be reading that poem out. But I'm not hanging on that, kind of going, oh, my life depends on this. Now, a year ago, that was a very different place. I set up a business. I went part-time, and I tried to do all this, and I was creating courses and setting up IT systems, and I had an IT person working with me, and I was doing all this kind of business stuff. And I was trying to do 10 things all at the same time. And I exhausted myself. Walking away from it all, because I got burnt out. And the reason why I got burnt out is I just tried too much too soon.
Yeah.
And it just didn't work. And of course, the cost of living crisis didn't help either, and everything else. So I went back to work full time, but I just kind of took a real chill pill. I just kind of went, it'll all arrive in its own time. And interestingly enough, that's when things really started to come. People started to turn up, give me opportunities. Do you want this? Do you want that? Certain things I didn't ask for, people came knocking on my door, and I'm kind of like, okay,
Right, yeah. No, that's great message in what you're saying there. Thanks very much for that. And like your work, you're really utilizing, really helping with your stories, because I can see that what you sent me, your bio was really good. You sent me there, like you're helping the LGBT life and body issues, exercise and personal growth pain. So that's helping a multitude of people. So is there a website that people can find you on, Diarmuid, as well?
You can, yeah. It's dwriter.com. So if you look up Diarmuid Fitzgerald and just type in the word writer, or dwriter, you will find me. So there's that website. I'm on Facebook under my name, Diarmuid Fitzgerald. So it's DIARMUID Fitzgerald. And then I'm on Instagram under dwriters with an S. So dwriters, because there is a dwriter on Instagram. And I've tried to claim that website, and every time it goes, yeah, that's taken. Oh, damn you. But so it's dwriters on Instagram and dwriter on the website. So it's as close a match as I can get there. So people can look that up. Actually, my website does need a bit of a revamp. At the moment, it only kind of tells publication history and a few things. I don't really put my services on there, because that's one thing I want to do, is kind of start putting the services more, packaging it the right way, and learning how to do all that. So
No, I'll be happy to share all your
Mm,
links as well on the show notes for people to find as well, Dermot.
that's great. Yeah.
Yeah, no, great. Yeah, because getting back a little bit to what you were saying earlier on about, NLP, I've done it myself, the practitioner,
Mm,
and you're saying, it takes a while to actually use some of this stuff you've done. You wait. It can take time to kind of
mm.
for people to listen, to utilize this information. Isn't would you agree with that?
I would, yeah. I mean, it's a journey, and you don't know how long it's going to take.
Yeah,
And I would say just keep at it, keep going, get into routines. Like it's really only been the last 2 years that things have really began to take off for me.
yeah,
And one of the patterns I notice, and this is what I notice with a lot of people, is that things happen not in, say, if you were to graph it, people expect things to happen in an easy slope. But
yeah,
what tends to happen is it goes in the called logarithmic scale, the asymptote. A long time, nothing's happening, nothing happens, nothing happens. Suddenly, whoop, 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 and it goes like that.
yeah,
And that's when you have to, even when things are flatlining in terms of you're putting out there, you're putting out there, putting out there, and it's like no return, no return, return, rejection, rejection, rejection. You're kind of going, God damn it. That's when you have to keep going.
hmm,
And then eventually you kind of hit a tipping point and you actually hit a number of them. And then all it takes is one opportunity, one door will open. So like that, when I was down in West Cork and I made that decision of show up with my writing and to actually take it seriously and treat it as a second job. Like if you're just writing and you're treating it as a hobby and you want to get published, you're going to have to develop a consistent practice, whether it's writing a novel, a book, a non-fiction book, children's fiction, YA, whatever. Like there's a lot involved in writing. In writing first draft, great. That's just the first draft. You will
yeah,
also have to have that edited a lot, and and it's kind of like then going to the next stage and informing yourself and doing a lot of reading. So I the three basic minimum things you should be doing. You need to be reading a lot, writing a lot, and editing a lot. Now you don't necessarily have to be doing all three at the same time, but you could be mixing and matching. And it'd be really important. They're the three basics, ultra basic. At a minimum, you have to be doing all three, not necessarily at the same time, but
yeah,
swapping in and out. And then if you keep at it, like you've been obviously keeping at it, you're writing, you find then book number 2 is a bit easier because you know more. Like
yeah.
book 1 took 4 years for me to put together
Hmm.
because that was Thames Way when I first wrote the first poem to when it got published. Book 2 took 3 years, but that was a back catalogue for 20 years of writing.
Hmm.
And then this book was also 20 years catalogue of writing, but that was put together in the space of about 3 or 4 years. And then right now, like I'm writing the nonfiction book, and that's just flowing in.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
I don't think that'll need as much editing as the others because
Mm.
I've kind of gotten to place now. When I write stuff now, it's written to a fairly high level. It just
Hmm.
comes out. I wouldn't say ready to go, but maybe 2 or 3 edits, and where you go.
Right, yeah, yeah. Would you be happy to read another one of your poems as well,
Yeah,
Dermot? If you're happy to
I
do that.
would.
Thanks very much.
So this one, I'll give a little intro. Is I wrote this poem during lockdown, the first lockdown, when everything was happy clappy, and
Mm.
although the world found like Armageddon, we didn't know what was happening, and
Yeah.
it was like the plague has arrived, and run away from everybody. But the weather was great, and it was coming towards the end of things were beginning to change. So this poem is called. So this poem is a more of a positive take on the lockdown. A lot of poetry and writing was very negative, but I kind of took the opposite view. It's called Bottle Bank Therapy. On the first day of ease from lockdown, I bring a box full of bottles, green, brown, clear, and blue. They shine in the sun. Glass shards litter the ground. I pick my way carefully from the bank to select a bottle. The neck is smooth. I lob it down the hole. Listen to the cacophony of the breaking, a joyous crashing sound. The way glass clinks to glass makes the sound of rain. It is heaven to me as I let go and keep letting go and think, how will we gather our smashed selves into a new whole?
Very cool. Very good. Because we all remember them days.
Mm,
Yeah, great. Very good. It's
yeah.
very well written there, Dermot. Thank you. And do you have a strategy when you write yourself, Dermot? Like, would you write a certain amount of words a day, or what way would you usually write?
Yes, I do. I have this, and this is one thing I've learned, and some of the last few years I learned it is set up a routine. If you can do 10 minutes a day, 15 minutes a day, rather than doing, oh yeah, the whole weekend free and I'm going to kill myself and do like 12 hours of writing. You're probably not going to do that. So I would say less is more, and do it more often. So start off at 5 if you have to. If you have to pair right back to that, then it goes 10, 15. So I write for about half an hour-ish every morning before work. Sometimes I don't get that half an hour. It just depends. But, you know, I write variously between 15 to half an hour. But I want to build it up towards an hour and then more. And so if you do that every day, you'd be surprised at how much progress you make. So after 30 days, say if you write for half an hour every day, you probably might have, you know, the guts of half a book written, or, you know, a quarter of a novel, or, you know, short stories, whatever you're, you know, whatever the person is into, you know, and maybe just like a first draft, it may be very rough around the edges, who cares? You're just writing it. So I would strongly recommend build a routine. Writing is a habit, just like everything else, and you need to build a habit. So you know how to walk, you know how to talk, you know how to eat, you know most people know how to drive, you know how to do work, whatever work you're in. Like that, they're all habits. So treat your writing the same. So build it as a habit and carve out the time. And if you find yourself, oh, I don't have the time, well, make the time. Everybody gets the same 24 hours. Like nobody, you know, from us to Elon Musk. Elon Musk can't buy an extra 5 hours a day to do what he's doing. What he can do is he can buy loads of people to be around him so he can offload his work to them. But he's at that status. But, you know, when you're starting off, drop certain things that may not be important. Like, are you a neat freak? Do you clean your house constantly? No, maybe go do the writing instead. If you've got kids, if they're old enough, train them up to clean the house and get them to do it, and then you go off and do the writing. Do you know? So it's kind of like find ways of doing things like that. Some people write in their car, some people write in the library, some people write in a coffee shop. Find a space that works for you, and do the writing and make it regular. And when you do that, it becomes routinized, and then you suddenly find yourself going to your desk or going to your computer or laptop or mobile phone or whatever else it is. And it's building that mastery to actually build the writing. And that will pay dividends in anybody's career.
Well, that's great advice, yeah, because like a lot of people think when they're going to write a book, it's going to be a massive task, but little steps to build it up, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, it is. I'm not going to BS people. It is a massive task. There's a lot involved, and there's a lot involved more than just simply the first draft. But it's like climbing a mountain. You know, how do you climb a mountain? One step at a time.
Exactly.
You know, so it's like, you know, if you're sitting at the base of the mountain whining, complaining, you know, mountain, it's like, just take the next step. Do you know? So the next step is write the next 100 words, and then write the next one, the next one, the next one. And then when you got the first draft done, EP, great, and then maybe go back and edit it again yourself a few times, and then maybe you call in help. You know, go out there, do workshops, you know, hire me, you know, and things like that. You know, do that. Learn from people who've done that path before you. Because I did the slow, like when I learned that, you know, I could say I did it the slow, stubborn way. Now I'm learning things like, God, I wish I'd known this 15 years ago. I would have saved 15 years of my life in terms of the writing. What I now know. But sometimes you don't know the things you need to know until you actually do it. And I found it's true. The people, the places, and the opportunities show up. You know, if you take that growth mindset there. And it's not always necessarily the talented people, because I've been in writers groups where when I joined them, I was not the talented person. You know, there were people there who were way more talented than me. But I applied myself more. And now some of these people, they don't have work published. And I'm 3 books later. Some of them only have a couple of stuff published here and there. So I applied myself consistently. Consistency helps you a lot. Definitely. One of the best advices I ever read about it was a book on writing, was the page will teach you. Page will teach you. So as you write, you learn. You know, and your first novel may not be your first book, may not be the first book published. It mightn't even be the second one. It could be the third one. And I say there's now self-publishing, so that's a great experience, is to go out there and do that, because you learn what it takes. You know, the editing, the printing, the distribution, the book cover, all that. That's a huge learning experience. And then say you can always then go to a publishing house after that. Go, look, I've got a book self-published, but I want to get my second book published by you. They might be willing to take you on.
Definitely, you know, that's a great point. Thanks very much. Can I ask you as well, Diarmuid, your favorite books to read as well? I suppose the main one that inspired you to be a writer, is any authors or books that you can think of? It doesn't have to be our favorite, but one that comes to mind.
Well, at the moment, I'm reading this book, and this one's phenomenal. It's called Trust Your Vibes by Sonia Chakach.
Right.
So I saw her in that Hay House workshop, and she's amazing. She's a power of nature, or force of nature, and that really inspired me hugely. There, Louisa Hay, You Can Heal Your Life. I've been massively Eckhart Tolle. I have loads of them there. And then in terms of poetry, then there's been various poets, but probably one of my favorite poets, Ivan Boland, an Irish writer. And then there's been loads of other Seamus Heaney, as people may know. He's been an inspiration. Yeah. And it's good to just read people's lives, you know, pick them up on Wikipedia and just kind of read. You know, J.K. Rowling is another lady who inspires me. I know some people being turned off by her views and trans rights issues, but I'm just like, you know, okay, whatever your approach, and that is just sometimes detach the person from the view if you can, and then kind of go just look, you know, maybe be inspired by their life, maybe not by what they think.
Yeah, no, that's great. That's great. Yeah. Do you have all your books there to show people who are watching on YouTube? Do you have?
Well, I just have this one to hand, which is called The Singing Hollow, and then I have another one which is called Thames Way, and then another one called Thousand Sparks. There.
Yeah. No, Diarmuid, I appreciate you coming on tonight to the podcast. And what's next for yourself? What do you want to tell people? Any events coming up that people look out for?
Sure. Yeah. Well, what's next is in January I'll be running I'm currently running a poetry workshop. Yeah. And I'm doing that, and then I'll be running that again in January. So if people are interested, they can go onto the website, or they can send me an email at deinIreland@gmail.com is my email. So DEINIRELAND@gmail.com, and then just send me an email, and then, you know, I do that on website. There is a fee for it, and then they want to, I can do that workshop. And the whole point of these workshops is how to take your writing in poetry, wherever level you're at, and then kind of scrub it up to a level that's ready to be sent out to publication.
That's a great service,
And then I do the same with novel writing. Novel writing is a little bit longer. It covers more of the basics of, you know, what's involved in novel writing. So I do that as well. So people can get in touch that way through the website. If they go to the contacts, there is a kind of a form they can use, or they can send me an email directly there. So, or they can just like me on Facebook, or friend me on Facebook, I should say. That's another way in, through Messenger. So there's various ways in, and then in terms of the writing, I'm writing that nonfiction book there. So, and I'll be putting that book proposal together and sending it to Hay House, and you never know.
Yeah. No, I wish you all the success going forward, Diarmuid, and all you do and all your writing and the great work that you do all together.
Thank you.
Okay, so thanks everyone for tuning in to tonight's podcast with Diarmuid Fitzgerald. I'm going to share all your links on the show notes and your bio. So thanks again.
Okay, thank you then. Take care.
Thanks everybody. Good night and take care. Hello everyone, Mark here. Thank you for watching another episode of my Authors Tuesday podcast. I recently published a book of children's stories called The Adventures of Larry Lamppost and Friends. The book began life as bedtime stories I wrote for my own children. If you'd like to purchase my book, follow the link in the description box below. By buying my book, you are also supporting my podcast series for authors, which is giving a voice to writers in Ireland and across the world.